They're going. Everybody said go. They know. Even there's free Madonna tickets out there.
Hey. Hey, I want one.
Nothing's for free.
Anyone's got one?
Yeah, seriously.
Is that all down? It's better this way, right?
Silence is always yes, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah. Unless when it's not. So we're going to talk about the next step. As soon as we're ready. You guys ready? The column people. We made our adjustments for the room. Similar to last time, you're going to see why we take the time to kind of what we call front load these assignments when it comes to the workflow and be a little bit more systematic about it. We noticed looking up on the walls today, a lower percentage were actually masks, right? A lot of them were mask-ish in that people took the time to resize them and try and put them in the right spot. But the problem is that it's not the same as masking. I talked to my group a little about the correlation being, now there's always a drawing component then, digital drawing. Last time the drawing component was the masking of it, right? Very simple concept is just to see that level of not doing it and trying to get by getting close enough. That has an exponential effect as the work gets more and more complicated, and it becomes to the point where you actually can't fake it anymore because it actually requires a certain amount of geometry and process to get there anymore. So the next step, you're really going to need to have a clean jumping off point for the two-dimensional information that you have. Where we left off, we had these black and white images that were brought in, right, to Photoshop and Illustrator. We made our grids, and what we're going to do now is use this information to make a three-dimensional representation of it. That's going to be a single surface. So for every one image that was in your grid, we're going to have a corresponding image that's going to be, or a corresponding surface rather, that's going to be in here. So I have Rhino open, and this is the template that is starting off, and that template is organized exactly like your Illustrator was, right? We've got 4 positions. Each position has 4 time, plus the composite on the end. So it should look pretty familiar. We have a little bit of a space here just for visual clarity, but you can imagine it being the exact same layout without those gaps. I'm in Photoshop looking, and I'm going to grab one of my images and open it in Photoshop. And what I want to do is I want to crop it to the area of just the board itself, the MDF board. Now this isn't a great example, so let me open up one that has a little bit more context in it, like this one. I'll get to this before it was done. So this one needs to be rotated. I'm gonna rotate it first. So I'm gonna rotate the image. I'm gonna hold down Shift and rotate it, and then I'm gonna crop it. It's really important at this point that we have consistent size. So what I'm not doing is I'm not visually just doing what I want with the cropping size of it and making it that I'm not using this unconstrained option up here where I get to go wherever I want. We know that the original board itself has the dimensions of being 30 by 22. So if I put that in there without any units, that's a proportion. That's what we were calling it, what Alex was talking about, the aspect ratio. That's a locked aspect ratio that's not scaled. So what I'm doing is, once I establish that, that's going to lock in as a custom aspect ratio. So now whenever I move it, it's not going to change my aspect ratio. It's just going to scale it. So now I know whatever I do, I'll be compatible with that size. The existing Rhino model, these rectangles, if I look at them and I look at their distance, are already at that size. 2.5 feet by 1 1/8. So that's the equivalent to that size in inches going on right there. once I have my image cropped correctly, and I'm basically trying to just mimic as much as I can the boundaries of the MDF, I'm going to run that crop and I'm going to save my changes as a cropped image. I'm going to use the PNG. So I've done this exact thing, basically just cropping, right? Nothing special. The important thing is that we're cropping it at a consistent ratio so that it'll match what's coming in. This is really important. You don't want to get kind of close to it. You want to use those proportions. That way we can, when we go into Rhino, we can actually bring these in at the correct size. So what I'm doing now is every one of these has a corresponding rectangle that's already on the right layer. So if I right click this layer editor and say select objects, that is position 1 time 1. The command I'm going to use is a Heightfield image command, and it's going to read the brightness of the image and use that to create the z-axis for the surface. I'm going to go and type that in. So the command is Heightfield, and it's one word. It's not in the menus, otherwise I'd go and bring it down in the menu. And my cropped images are in order. This is all my 8 a.m. images in order 1 to 4, so I'm going to grab 1 and 1 here and bring it in. It's going to ask me for my corner. I'll show you my O snaps here up in the top right. My O snaps are going to have the end O snap activated. If I right click it, it'll be the only one activated up in there. But I want to have that. That's going to allow me to snap to this corner, and then it's going to ask for my second corner or length. And I'm going to go over to the other side on the right-hand side there. Okay. So I've picked the 2 corners of it, right? It's telling me that the sample, it's asking me right now the number of sample points. I'm using 15 times 11. So why is that important? That's every other inch, basically. So every other inch, we're doing a sampling of the image. So if we looked at our dimensions, they'd be 30 by 22. So instead we're doing 15 by 11. The height is 0.5 feet, that's 6 inches. We have the option here to set the image as the texture. This is something that might change for you if you decide that your computer is starting to run a little slow and you're trying to show it in a shaded mode or something like that. It may or may not work on mine. I don't remember what my graphics card settings are before I tried this out. We'll let it on there. It won't hurt anything. It's more just a display option. The surface itself, it will be exactly the same whether or not you use this option. The important thing is that I use this second option here, surface with control points as sample locations. Control points, right? That's what we talked about before. We had our midpoints and then we had the control points that you guys drew. We're going to use the similar kind of logic. This time we're not going to use it to draw. We're going to use it to create a surface. And those surfaces, just like your curves, have control points. Those control points are going to be placed at the same spot where the image is red. And the way that we have it, the bright ones are going to go higher and the dark ones are going to go lower. That's how a Heightfield of an image works. It's a mapping of brightness for an image. Another reason why it was good that we have black and white kind of going into it. So we say, okay. It makes it. So it looks like this from the side, from the top. It's a grid. Any kind of NURB surface in Rhino is going to has a grid formation. These are the ISO curves that are going down on it. Those are just displayed. So if I look in my perspective view, the sampled image is sampling it and reading the height off of the original image. Heightfield. So in the rendered view, you can see that option is happening here. It's sampling the darker areas are contributing to the recesses and the brighter areas. So you can see how the shadow cast is affecting the sampling and then pulling the control points down for it in the rendered view. So we were responsible for one of these per grid, right? We're creating a kind of collection of that. So I'll do the next one. I did all the 8 a.m. ones, so I'm going to change my current layer to be position 2, time 1. You can definitely rename these layers like 8 a.m., 10 a.m. No problem. You just double click on the layer itself and you can change the name to whatever time you actually used. It's just important that you keep them organized. So you can see because I cropped that image to be proportionate, it snapped right to this grid underneath it. It fits in there perfectly, and I don't have to worry about it overlapping or not fitting or anything like that. So that's why we took the time to do that. So the command again, if I right click up in the white space, I can look at my previous commands and do the Heightfield again. And I'm just going to pick now my second one. And my end snap and my other end snap. It's going to remember my last option. So if I did it right the first time, all I'm going to do is accept these options. And should start to see the second one kind of coming in there. So this is the second one. And that's pretty much it. We wanted at this point going into Friday to have the surfaces ready so that we can move on to the next step. But first we need to make sure that this is achievable and there's not any kind of technical problems with this. But this is starting to highlight why we need the kind of nice contrast in images, and it's also going to start reflecting what happens in terms of your topography being separate from someone else's, right? The people that have different formations and different densities are going to have vastly kind of different outputs from it. These are existing in real scale. So right now these surfaces are the size of your MDF board, and they have a 6-inch range because that's what we told it, meaning the Heightfield, the difference between the lowest and the highest is defined as 6 inches overall. There was a question that started over there.
How are you switching back and forth between views? Just like right now, this view.
So these are the viewport tabs. They come in Rhino. I put them over to the side so you guys can see them a little easier. When you first open Rhino and you haven't opened it, they'll be at the bottom. And you can just go to this tab orientation and change it to be something else. But yeah. We realize that a lot of you guys might not be too comfortable with Rhino. So it's going to take a little bit of time. We're only using one command. So the important things are that you use the end snaps up here for that. If you don't see the end snaps, O snap, they're down at the bottom. They need to be activated. So you want to click it and make sure it goes dark so you can see them. And we're using the end snap and we're using the Heightfield command. Otherwise in Rhino, you're using the left mouse to select objects and you're using the right mouse for camera controls. So in my perspective view, I'm orbiting with my right mouse. When I'm in the top view, that same right does this. And this is the same exact model. I'm just changing the preview settings up here. So I'm looking at it in wireframe, but it would look the same as if I changed it to rendered, right? The render doesn't tend to show the curves unless I change my displays here to say I'm in this display panel to the right. But you'll see as this model gets bigger and bigger, you'll probably want to keep it in the wireframe menu up here because it's the faster method. But you can see that this proportion allows us to rescale that image to fit in this grid. So all your stuff should be pretty much the same size. The cropping gets handled in Photoshop. It gets messy if you try and do it. So, yeah. Same deal. What I did on my fifth one is when I opened it up in Photoshop. I think I still have the Photoshop file for that one. Yeah, orientation 1 I called it. And I saved it as I did a save as a copy, and I saved it as a PNG. So this is this one right here. I saved it as a composite and looked at it. And I believe I adjusted the levels to it on its own with the same settings that I used on the previous. But that composite image is darker, so you might need to make it a little bit lighter. But I wouldn't play with it too much. So my composite image is in there, and yeah, so when I go to that one, that's my composite for number 1 in Rhino. I use the same crop settings. So the other good thing about Photoshop is now when I go to crop this image, it remembers that 30 by 22 because it was the last setting that I used. So again, if I just do it that right the other time, it'll be a preset for my cropping that I can use to crop this image to the right size, and then I go in and use the Heightfield. So this one would be, I put it up in the composite. It's already kind of cropped. It should be cropped, and it would be on my position 1 composite image, which is here. And I use the same settings as before. Any other questions?
The problem I have is that some of the projects they're all like well centered, whereas some are kind of like pretty much out to the frame of the MDF. So I don't know what the problem is. Is it the perspective that when you look at it, it kind of like
Perspective.
gets out? So is it okay when you crop it out, you're gonna do some of the loops?
That's okay. I think it's okay in my section. It's okay.
My section too.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of downloading on the Mac with the layout maybe different from.
The layout's different. Yeah. Yeah. If you're easily kind of intimidated, not you, but if anybody is, I would just go to the labs and use the ones in the labs. This is a fairly kind of light lifting part of it, but we're going to keep working on this kind of stuff, and you want to be able to follow it a little faster. The commands, a lot of these commands will work, but I can't guarantee that because it is a different version. It's not a full featured version of Rhino in the way that this is. Mac Rhino is a little cheaper and it's a little more affordable, but it's a little less featured in the same sense. It's out of beta now, which is good, but it's not one-to-one the same. Yeah, it'll be in the same folder. How do you turn it in? You're going to bring it on Friday? No, I don't think we can print it.
We're not printing this, so you should have a file that has this done. Okay, right?
We're going to bring it, and this is what we're going to use for the next step.
It's accessible here. It's not. I left it at home.
Yeah.
I have it here, so you can have questions answered. You can advance on it. You can work with it. You can get tips and pointers from your colleagues. Right? Have it here.
Yeah, we're going to need it. But yeah, it's a good question because we're not printing it like we did for today. It's a step away from being up on the wall yet. We got to do some more stuff to it. What? No, just hold on to the Rhino file. Yeah.
Just have a Rhino file. Rhino file for Friday. Correct.
Yeah.
YouTube. How many views did the last video get?
Like 65, I think.
65?
Something like that.
But they're very helpful.
Was it
Good.
helpful?
Good.
Very helpful.
Any more questions about this so I don't have to record everybody talking about dinner? Yeah. Hold on, guys. I can't hear him. He's all the way in the back. Well, why would you do anything different than what I tell you? You already made it? Well, it's a digital file, though. So go to the original and recrop it. Yes, if you've cropped it at a different size, you're saying you're going to have to go back to before you cropped it. You have to go back to the image version before you cropped it. You don't want to do it as a different size than the 30 by 22. You just got to go back to that earlier version. Yeah, for sure. Good question. As we ratchet up the digital, the accuracy is going to get important. I can't stress that enough after seeing what was on the wall today. You cannot, there's no such thing as an eye test anymore. It doesn't work that way anymore. You really have to make sure your numbers are right on this stuff or stuff will start failing. And you don't want to go back multiple steps on this kind of stuff.
So some of our images from that project, we should go back and recrop it.
Yeah, so you notice some of those projects on the wall are really kind of dull. They're kind of grayed out. Maybe maybe they did the cropping, they didn't do the leveling. Now's the time to go back and re-level them. Because there's some really nice examples on the wall too. You can start to see why now we're talking about nice, good light sources, because that's going to offer us range across all the images. But if we don't have that, we're going to see a lot of, they're all going to look pretty much the same, and that's kind of flatlands. Yeah, we're looking for the opposite of that. We want some real choices to make. Yeah. Okay.
All right, good
Thanks, guys.
session, you guys.
Good job.